In this video short, you'll be learning about variables. So a variable is a storage location in memory that we give a name to. A variable would be similar to going to the UPS store and trying to ship something. The first thing you need to do is to pick out a box that's large enough to hold the item that you're attempting to ship. In technical terms, we refer to these sizes as data types. In Java, we have several different choices. We have whole number types, we have floating point types, a Boolean type, and a character type. Character-typed variables are almost like a whole number type because they hold a single character value, which has a numerical equivalent. If you look on an ASCII chart, for example, and look up the value of the character capital A, you will notice that it has a value of decimal 65. So if we declare a variable of type char and assign a value to it of 65 and then print it out to the screen, you can see that it gives us the capital letter A. So the 65 decimal would be the same as inside of single quotes, just putting that letter A. You'll see when we run that, we still get the same output. Now, a byte type will hold a value from negative 128 to positive 127. So let's try and assign the value 130 to it, and let's see that we get a red squiggly here. If I rest my mouse over the red squiggly, it tells me it's an incompatible type because I put a value in that's larger than can be stored in a byte type. So as long as we put a number in there between negative 128 and 127 positive, then that'll be just fine. If we want to store larger numbers, we could use the int type, short for integer. And now you'll see that I can use the number 130, which is larger than a byte, but is well within the range of an int. So the range on an int is negative 2,147,483,648 to positive 2,147,483 or 474,483,647. So that's quite a large number. We also have a long type which stores whole numbers in 8 bytes, which means we can store huge numbers in here, all the way up to 9 quintillion, 233 quadrillion, 372 trillion, 36 billion, 854 million, 775,808 to the positive number 9 quintillion, 233 quadrillion, 372 trillion, 36 billion, 854 million, 775,807. And you don't have to memorize these ranges. You can find a chart of the Java data type sizes by a simple Google search. Now, an interesting thing about these larger numbers is that we have to actually designate the type of the larger number in the value that we're assigning. So here I'm creating a long called my long, and you'll see that this is 11 digits, but I had to add the capital L at the end here to inform the compiler that that value is a number of type long. If you don't do that, it'll give you an error. In addition to a long, we also have a short, which is only 2 bytes in size. I'm going to make it a little bit simpler on myself here, so I don't have to change my name of my variable each time. So we're just going to call it my bar. So a short, as I said, is 2 bytes, so that's negative 32,768 to positive 32,767. So we'll show you if we do, say, 40,000, and that's going to throw an error. If we go to 30,000, then we're within the size of a short. So those were our whole number data types. Next, we'll take a look at the floating point types. We'll start with a double, which is of size 8 bytes. So as we showed you with the long, that's a very huge number. And we have to put the D on the end there to designate that it is a double, the value that we're actually assigning to the variable. Then we also have a float, which is a 4 byte sized data type. And we need to indicate that the value is a float by adding the F to the end of the value. So essentially it comes down to this: when you're declaring a variable, you're going to need to decide first what the data type is that you're going to want to use. So is it going to be a whole number, a floating point number, a Boolean, a character type? So that's going to be based on how big of a number or a value that you're going to store into that variable. For the most part, we're going to use int for whole numbers. We'll use double for floating point numbers. We'll use Boolean to store the values of true, false, and we'll use char for storing single characters. And in addition, Java has a string data type for storing a series of characters. So when we declare a variable, we want to first define the type and then give it a name, for instance, x, which I should point out is not a very good variable name. You should always use descriptive variable names. For instance, if you're having a variable that's going to store sales tax or tax rate values, then use a name for that variable like sales tax or tax rate. Now the error that we see here, by the way, is that I've declared the variable, but we haven't assigned it a value. And so if I go to try and print this, you'll see that we get an error. And that's because there is no pre-assigned value to the integer data type. So what we need to do is either assign it a value in the beginning when we're declaring it, which is called initializing it, because you're both declaring it and assigning a value to it, or just simply declare the variable and then later in the program use the assignment operator. So that's the equals sign, because we're assigning a value to it. The value to the right of the equal sign is going to be assigned to the variable that we have identified here on the left of the assignment operator. You should note that with variables, they have a memory location because we're actually storing these values right into memory. And the memory locations are really long addresses. It's almost like the address of a house on a street. You can think of the street address as the location and then people being inside of that house as the contents. So when we assign values in a variable, we just have to remember to always do that with the assignment operator. And it should be noted that we can change the value that we've assigned to our variable at any time within the program. That's why they're called variables, because they vary. So you can declare it and then assign a value, or you can initialize it while you're declaring it, and at any point in your program, you can change that value. That's it for now. Until next time, happy coding.